Hey, what's up? It's Haja Scott. I am like so happy to say hey. Hey, y'all. Hey, Facebook. Hey, Instagram. Hey, YouTube soon. I have been like MIA for the most part. You know, everybody's like, where you been? You been MIA. Man, life, y'all, right? Life. So we're all living it. We're all doing it. Happy Sunday, y'all. It is the end of September. It's about to be the fourth quarter of the year of 2022. 2022. Like, I just remember starting this off. I remember starting off doing a New Year's message of 2022. And here we are in the last quarter, the last section of the year, the last 3 months of 2022. Here we are. Not here yet, almost here. But today, I'm saying Happy New Year. Happy New Year for everybody that's going to catch this message later, or for everybody that catches the message today, 9/25, September 25th. It's a new year. That's why I'm wearing my little earrings and stuff, my little ball earrings, my ball drop earrings for the new year. It's a new year. No, it is not January 1st, okay, of 2023, coming soon. But it is a new year on the Jewish Hebrew calendar. Oh my gosh. So I'm not going to go into that whole message today, but this is a new year. And so us that are the body of Christ, us that are believers, us that are children of God, we have to understand that this new year affects us as well. So it's a new year. It's turned 5783. Really, I should be going this way, left to right, from right to left. Sorry, 5783. But I just want to say Happy New Year, because this message is about a new year, a new season, a new beginning. So I'm gonna say Happy New Year. Actually, let me just say something on that. So 5783. So if we talk about those numbers just real quick, I just want to throw this in because this just lets us know the promise of God that's over this season for our lives. The promise of God that is still over this world, that's still over your family, that's still over your life, over your calling, over your business, your ministry, your organization, your purpose. There's still purpose there. And so there's favor that's over it, y'all. We're going to talk about that. So we know three, or those of y'all who don't know, three, I like to say is a God number. I always say that on the time. It's the God number. So when I see three, I know we're talking about the Godhead, the Trinity. We're talking about God and his completion. God in his completion, all three parts, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And so 3 is also known as a number of completion. 8 speaks to new beginnings, you guys. We're in it, new beginnings. We've been talking about that for a minute. But 8, when you start seeing that number 8, God is talking about a new beginning. 7 is the number of completion, or a number of completion, but the number of perfection. Like that thing has been perfected, completed, set, it's ready to go. A lot of times it speaks to the end of a cycle. A cycle has passed, or something has gone forth, and it is in its completion stage. That's 7. And 5 is the number of grace. And that's why I love it so much, because God will talk to me all the time about grace, and the grace that he put over my life, the grace that he has given me to move into a new season of life, grace to do the things that he called me to do, grace for the things that I, didn't do way back in the day and I didn't do right, but he's given me grace to move forward in a new, and you too. So that grace is favor, y'all. And so 5783, this has meaning for us, for what we're about to step into, for our new beginning. So I just want to say that to y'all today. I did want to say Happy New Year, but I do have a little message, and it is coming from Genesis. And so God has been speaking to me about the life of Abraham in Genesis, and how his journey, some people, we like to look at it like it's so different and it's so far from ours. And he was the father of faith, and he was, he did everything right. He's like the father. Anybody that they say the father of something, you kind of feel like that's big, like that's not that ain't my life, guy. You know, like I'm, I'm feeling like what's his name, Gideon around here. Like I'm kind of the least. The least tribe, and then in my tribes, in the least family, and then in my family, I'm like the least of the family members. Sometimes we start feeling like Gideon, and God is saying, no, there is still favor here. So we sometimes don't really relate much to Abraham, but God's been walking me through Abraham's story in Genesis and talking to me about it. So I want to talk to y'all a little bit about that, a little bit, and share a little bit about what he's been sharing with me. So we're going to start with all that New Year fiasco. We're going to start with Genesis 12. And in Genesis 12, it's talking about the new beginning for Abraham, beginning of a new season for him, a new walk of life, a new promise that even comes to him, a lot like what we have going on, a lot where kind of where he is right now and what he's walking in. These are not great circumstances of life. These are not necessarily promised, he's walking in blessings and all this other stuff. No, just he's like this regular dude and his regular family, and they set off on a journey. Well, where we pick up in Genesis 12. Oh, and by the way, his name ain't even Abraham, y'all. His name is Abram at this point. So I'm just going to go high level. We're not going to stay on the journey for long. Maybe we'll break this down, in other messages or something like that, because he has a pretty intense journey, and it's kind of like a lot of our lives. There's ups and downs and turns and corners and falling down and getting back up and promises and mistakes. Yeah, that's what we're going to walk through. So in Genesis 12, I'm going to start with verses 1 through 3. And I'm going to just read that because it starts off with a promise. This is God's promise to Abraham. And so it says, now the Lord said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. This is that blessing of Abraham, y'all. This is the blessing that God comes to Abraham. He's on the journey with his family already. He's not the leader. He's not leading everything. His father, he was there with his father and his brother's wife and his nephew Lot. By Lot, he was there with them, and they were journeying. And then there was loss, there was death. His father actually passed away, but Abraham is called to continue on the journey, and this is the journey of his life. This is the journey that God wants to speak to him about. These are the promises that God wants to bring into his life and show him how that's going to affect generations to generations to generations, all based on what the promise that God was giving him in that moment. So that's the promise. Abraham sets off. God says, walk forward, keep going, keep moving, go forward. And Abraham's probably like, all right, okay, cool. But where? Like north, south, east, west? Like which way you want me to go? Did you want me to, like a destination? God says, go, walk with me to a land, basically, that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to tell you about the place. I'm not going to show you the place. I might tell you a little bit about the journey, but your feet have to begin walking. Your feet have to begin walking. And that's what Abraham does. So high level, this is what happens with Abraham, y'all. He journeys through a lot. Like I said, I think I'm going to do, if God aligns it and things work out, I think I'll do a message on some of these areas of Abraham's life, because these messages are like key for us getting through a lot of the things that we are going through. Some of the journeys that he has, the mistakes, what we would call failures, the fears, the rushed decisions, and then the consequences of those decisions. That's a lot like our lives. So, hey y'all, welcome in. We're talking about a new beginning. And God is showing us a message through the life of Abraham. So yeah, so we're going to talk about that and just high level through famine. So first, Abraham walks through famine, starting in right there in chapter 12. Like he starts walking, he's like, get everybody, get your wife, get your belongings, get the people of your house, and let's go. And he does. And he takes everybody of his house, and they immediately walk into famine. Okay, so y'all, I'm gonna turn my ringer off because y'all, this phone will be interrupting. Okay, so so they begin in famine. They're in a famine. He goes over to Egypt. Like that's where are we right now? What are they reporting on the news? What are they reporting in everywhere else? Oh, we're in a famine, or famine is coming, or what? His day is not like so unlike the things that we're walking in. These are seasons of life, y'all. These are seasons of life. Things change. One day we're good. We're so far away from famine that we're living in so far away from famine. Okay. Like in surplus, a lot of us, let's just be honest. Some people, y'all have been living a lot of surplus. And then we go through lean years. We go through famine years. We go through years of struggle. We go through years where everything doesn't come abundantly. We come through years where we have to work a little extra harder for the same things it seemed like we had before. We go through these times of famine. So Abraham did that. Now, Abraham also went through some with that famine, and we're going to talk about this. He went through a couple of mistakes, y'all. He's called the father of faith, right? The father of faith. So you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, like he's like he did everything right. Wrong. No, Abraham was sitting up there lying, y'all. Well, kind of telling those lies that were like, what is it? A lot of lie wrapped in a little bit of truth, or a little bit of truth wrapped in a lot of lie. It doesn't even matter. It was not the truth. So he gets to Egypt basically, and he tells Sarah, hey, this is his wife, y'all, or Sarai at the time. He tells Sarai, hey, say that I'm your brother, because I don't want any drama. I don't want them to try to kill me over you, because girl, girls, I already know they're going to be after you. So they're going to try to take you. Pharaoh's going to probably try to take you as his wife. Please just say I'm your brother so that they don't try to kill me, so that they can have you. They have this little agreement. He does this twice, y'all. I'm just going to skip on through. He does this in Egypt with the Pharaoh, and he does this also later on, like the same thing. This is like us. So we go through life, and we go through a situation, and God brings us through. And you would think we would learn our lesson, right? You would think that we would be like, and we kind of do in those prayers sometimes, I'm never going to do that again. I promise, like God, for real, I promise, like, I'm not going to do this no more. I'm not getting caught up with this. Like, I'm not going to be here. If you could just get me through this time, I promise God, I'm never going to come back here again. We've said those prayers. We've said those declarations. We've said these things. This is Abraham. So he does all of this. Pharaoh basically, takes Sarah as his wife, or concubine. Basically brings her into, his house, his dwelling, with, I'm sure, the intent to take her as a wife. And he finds out that Abraham's lying. And so he's like, this guy says they sister and brother, but I'm watching them, and their interactions are not brother and sisterly. And so basically he calls him, he asks him how come he lied to him, how come he brought all this upon his house, and he sends him along his way. He blesses him and everything. So God gets him out of this, y'all. God gets him out of this situation where he was lying, and they could have tried to cut off his head for that, but they didn't want any problems with a quote unquote man of God. They didn't want any problems with his God. They didn't want any problems with him, because I'm sure they could feel and see and sense the anointing that's over him. And they just wanted him gone. Like, they was like, look, let's just get out of here. We won't even hold you accountable for what you did. grace. We won't even hold you accountable for what you did. We're going to grace and favor. We're also going to give you sheep, oxen, all this other stuff to go along on your way. He's blessed. You would have thought that he would have been like, okay, I'm not going to do that again because I almost, could have been a situation. But he does it again. Later chapters, he does it again. So he goes through all this learning situation, guys, just like us. Not doing everything right. He ends up doing it again with the king of Abimelech, which is the king of Gerar. And he ends up doing the same thing and lying about it. And God has to come to this man in a dream and be like, leave that lady alone. That's not your wife. That's another man's wife. And God has to come and save Abraham from that situation, but also save Abimelech, because I don't know the custom and what they were doing in that time. But again, I'm sure they were preparing to make Sarai, his wife. So he lived and he learned, and we want to say he learned, but he was still walking with God. Mistakes and all, flaws and all, he was walking with God. But Abraham went through loss too. So a lot of us are dealing with loss. A lot of us are dealing with separation. A lot of us are dealing with things that were before and they're not anymore. Well, Abraham walked through that too. So when he left on the journey, Abraham took his nephew Lot. And so he took Lot because Lot was part of his family at the time. He took Lot because Lot was his nephew. His father had passed. He was his responsibility. So he was of his house. And he took Lot with him. Now, we can stand to say God might have told him what things to take and what things not to take. But it doesn't matter. He took Lot with him. And when he got there, when he got to a certain place, this is in chapter, we're walking through chapter 12 all the way to 22, you guys. Not going through and reading it, but like the stories. And so chapter 13. And so Lot, basically, they get to a place where God wants to give Abraham this land. He does. But it will not be able to service both the wealth and the favor and the grace that has come upon Abraham's life, but then it's also come upon Lot's life due to the relationship with Abraham. And so God calls Abraham to separate from Lot. And that's life for us sometimes too. We journey with people. We journey and we go through seasons of life with people, family, friends, co-workers, confidants, whatever. Like, these are people that are of our circle, of our family, of our, this is our tribe. And sometimes God calls you to say, yeah, but for X, Y, and Z reason, the route that you're going to take and the route that they're going to take is not the same. This is where the separation occurs. That's a hard thing, y'all. That's loss. Now, we always think about loss, about death, and death is loss. But it's not the only type of loss. When you have loss of a relationship, loss of a friendship, loss of any type of covenanted relationship. And as I say, covenanted, because it's like both people, you've agreed like this is what y'all are, or what you do, or how you operate. You're both in agreement. So it's a covenanted relationship. And that's not easy, when the reason is because God called that separation. I'm not saying because of, a marriage or something that you're like, or even bad situations where I got to get out of here. There are times where God says, this has run its course. We have come to the end of this cycle. And now there is a new thing that I want you to do. There's a new direction that I want you to take. There's a path that everybody that was with you over here, they're not going to be able to go into. We can talk about different reasons like unbelief. Some people are just not at the same belief level. And some people, can sway you to, make other decisions, keep you out of the mindset of what God has for you, or even the mindset of the new thing that he's going to take you into, because there's a lot of shedding that has to come, with that. In order for us to move into a new mindset, you do recognize we have to release old mindsets. You can't just take on new and kind of put it on top. Like, this is a new mentality. There's going to be contradiction between the new and the old. The new has to replace the old. The new has to say, this is new truth. This is new enlightenment. This is something I didn't know before. They can't operate in the same space. So it's kind of the same thing when God calls for a separation of something. They can't operate in the same space. They can't. We go through examples where they say of the Proverbs in the Bible, you can't put new wine in old wineskins. Why? The old wineskins, they can't hold the new. They don't have the capacity. You pour it in, they'll burst. They're old, they're worn, they're not sturdy enough. They cannot hold the capacity of the new weight and the new substance that it's supposed to hold. You're going to waste the opportunity. You're going to waste the wine. It's not going to come forth what should come forth. So God tells us this over and over in many different settings, that the new and the old cannot walk in the same season. There are some things that have to be put to the side. And Abraham had to make the decision to say, okay, I recognize this is what you're saying, God, and I'm going to move forward in this, and I'm going to take the initiative to do that. He went to Lot and said, look, this is the land that's here before us. You choose which area you want, and you go that way and I'll go the other way. I'll just take that. Sometimes when loss is so hard, you don't want to make it harder. You kind of want to make everything just as simple as possible, because it's already so heavy to say, we're not going to walk in covenant anymore. It's not that I'm not going to see you. It's not that I'm not going to be able to talk to you. It's not that we're not going to be able to commune at any time, but the relationship we once had is no more. It's a hard pill to swallow. And so he's like, you just take what you want, and I'll take the rest, because I'm already having to deal with this. Abraham walked through loss, not very different from us. Abraham walked through rushed commitments. Rushed commitments. So we all know about Isaac and Ishmael, right? And so God had been promising Abraham a seed. He promised him a seed. Let's see. I don't know what chapter that's in right now, but he promised him an heir. And so God says, that's in chapter 15, walking 12 through 22, y'all. Abraham's story goes on just like ours. This is not something that was quick. This is something that he had to walk through. And so God promises him an heir. And Abraham says, this is chapter 15, verse 2. Abraham says, but Abram, he was still Abram at that time, said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring, indeed, one born of my house. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, this one shall not be your heir, but one who comes from your body. But one who will come from your body shall be your heir. And so God is promising him again. Then he brought him outside and he said, look toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. And God said to him, so shall be your descendants. And he believed the Lord, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Abraham didn't have what God said was the promise. Remember, he started him off on this and said, I'm going to give you all this stuff. Look at the land before you. North, south, east, west. East, west. You know, this land I give to you this day. You're going to go. Blessings, I'm going to bless you. And people that bless you, they'll be blessed. And people who curse you. He gave him all this promise. Oh, you're going to have descendants like the stars in the sky, like the sand on the shore. If you can count them, that's how many descendants you're going to have. Meanwhile, Abraham does not have a child. So in his head, he's like, I don't know how you're going to do this, God. I don't know how you're going to bring forth a promise of an heir, of a child, and generations of descendants. You know, okay, maybe there's a loophole to this, God. Maybe, you know, it's because I have other people in my household and I have maids and maid servants and things like that. And those that walk with me, nephews, you know, whatever. So maybe it's going to be this other person. And through them and their son, because they're part of my house, then this promise will take place. And God says, no, that's not what I said to you. Don't make up the rest of the story. Don't add to what I told you. I know it doesn't look like it now because it looks virtually impossible. Abraham at this time, I think he might already been 80 plus, because I know by the time the promise comes, he's like right at 99, you know, like 99, 100. So this is years of him walking through what God said was a promise, and it hasn't come to pass. So they go through things just like us. God gives us a promise, and we take matters into our own hand. After some time, Abraham and his wife, they decide, well, we're going to blame Sarah on this. His wife is like, not just is Abraham old, but I'm the one that has to birth this child. My body is past childbearing years. That's probably another sign that there's a miracle of God that wants to take place. That means everything naturally has come to an end. Everything that we can do in our power, that doctors can do, that man can do, everything that we feel like is feasible, attainable, achievable, God waits until all of that is like, okay, I'll just wait. What age? 65, 75, 85, 90? Oh, how about 90? I don't know any woman that has birthed a baby at 90. I mean, I'm just saying at that time, like Guinness Book of World Records, I don't know what the oldest age is, but we know society-wise, that's not likely. It's very unlikely. It would take a miracle for that to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what God waits for. But Sarah and Abraham are like, okay, so maybe God just meant that we would have a child in our household. So Sarah gets the idea of saying, hey, my maidservant Hagar, how about you go ahead, take her as a wife, have a child through her, that the promise will be fulfilled. Yeah, that wasn't God fulfilling any promise. I'm sure at the time Sarah might have said, God gave me a really great idea. But y'all, this is why it's so important to closely follow the voice of God. Because as a friend told me like way back or whatever, sometimes it sounds a lot like our voice. Because we've reasoned it. And we're like, this is good. This is good. So this must be God. That's not always God's voice. Just because something seems good. Sometimes it may seem completely not good. It may seem completely contrary to what you would normally do. And that could be God's voice. But that's why it's important for us to continually move closer to God so that we can hear him, and then we can discern his voice when it comes. different from our voice. Definitely different from the enemy's voice and the voice of doubt. So they go through, they have that's a little bit chapter 16. We're still moving through. And he marries, he ends up having a child, of course, with Hagar. And that's going to be more drama later, But God is saying that's still not the promise. When I promise a thing, it comes to pass. So you may delay it. You may take something else as the promise. You may take other things into your hand, but God says the promise is still the promise. And I will bring that thing forth. So Abraham's story continues. Y'all, he walks through that. So how many of us have walked through rush commitments? Rush things that we feel like, well, this is God. Or sometimes it's not even that we felt like it was God. It's just we wanted to do that. Yeah, Abraham does this. Abraham does this. But he's still the father of faith. And we're going to see why. So he goes through, you guys. He goes through a lot more. Like, again, I'm not going to go through all of this. Intercession, rescue missions. He had to go through and rescue his nephew Lot, even though they had separated. Again, doesn't mean relationship is completely over. He had to go through and speak on behalf of him and rescue him. He interceded for Sodom and Gomorrah, for the city of Sodom that God said he was going to destroy. And he interceded, for that. This is all the building of Abraham as he's journeying through this. And he's journeying with God. He goes through a new covenant. In chapter 15. Is it chapter 15? 17? Yeah, 17. Chapter 17, 18. He goes through a new covenant. And this, y'all, he goes through a covenant in the spirit. Let's just talk about that really quickly. So in the spirit, you know how, if you've heard this is kind of what this means, is things happen naturally. We know there's the earthly realm, there's the natural realm, and there's the spiritual realm, right? We know this. Things happen in the spiritual realm before we see them in the natural. That's why God promises a thing and then causes us to wait and believe on that thing until we see it in the natural. That's because that's the natural order of things. Well, this happens right here in Abraham. The promise that we just talked about of the heir that would come from his body was in chapter 15. And God talked about that, talks about his great number of descendants and everything. Well, that was what he does. He talks to him about that, but then he gives him a vision. And then he puts him to sleep. And that's still all in chapter 15. You can read that out. He puts him to sleep. He causes sleep to come upon him. And then he starts to talk to him about the things that's going to go on with his descendants, in his lineage, in his line, in his legacy. And he talks about how they're going to be in bondage up until 400 years, into the fourth generation. They're going to be in bondage. We know that happened. What we call the children of Israel that were slaves in Egypt, that Moses actually was the deliverer for. So we know this all came to pass, but this is the time where God first gives Abraham a vision and he talks to him about his heir. That's right in verse 1 of chapter 15. He says, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I'm your shield and exceedingly great reward." And so he's talking to him about that. Then he puts him to sleep later on in there, and he gives him a vision of things that's going to happen with these said descendants. This is all happening not in the natural. He's causing him to have a vision and a dream, and he's giving him a glimpse of the promise and what he's bringing forth in the spiritual realm as God is causing these things, creating these things, causing them to come to pass. And then, that's what I was going to jump into. The covenant, we see that God starts to do things in the natural that speak to what he showed him in the spirit. And so that's chapters 17 and 18. As you go through, we'll see here, he talks about the covenant of circumcision. I think we talked about circumcision before, the cutting away of the flesh, cutting away of the old, cutting away of the things that are not conducive to the new way. to the new growth, to the new life. Those things that come and bring infection and come and slow things down. They could even bring death. So it's a covenant, the covenant of circumcision. But then he also talks about, he gives him also in 17 and 18, after he talks about that, he says, I want you to be set aside. I want you to be circumcised. I want you to cut away all these da-da-da-da-da. And this is something that is also a new covenant, meaning everybody that comes after Abraham, they're going to have to walk in that covenant of circumcision. That is the covenant between them and God, right? But then in 18, God comes back again and says, hey, remember that promise that I told you about the descendants, and they were going to be, it was going to be an heir that came from your body, right? And it was going to be that their descendants were so great in number that the stars above you wouldn't be able to count, just like the stars above you couldn't count, and the sand on the shore you can't count, right? Remember when I talked to you about that? And then he comes and he sends the angels on his behalf, and he talks to Abraham about this time next year, your wife is going to have a baby. And it's unbelievable. Of course, it's unbelievable because once again, they haven't seen it and they're so far from it. They're so far from it. But God says the promise is still the promise. So that's 18. Sarah even laughs at that. That's how Isaac's name comes about. The promise, spoiler alert, the child that comes later, the promised child, Isaac, that's how his name comes about because it means laughter. And Sarah was saying, because God caused me to laugh. The first time this time when God is saying, hey, this time next year, you're going to have a baby. Sarah, your wife Sarah's going to have a baby. And Sarah laughs. And the angel of God said, why did Sarah laugh? And she's like, I didn't laugh. God can see all. And that was the first laugh. But when she had Isaac, when she delivered, when she had him, she laughed from joy, not from disbelief. Not from because that's crazy. Not because we haven't seen that. I don't know how that's going to happen. But this time it was pure joy and fulfillment of the promise. And that's why they named the baby Isaac. God has caused me to laugh. So I want to throw that in. So y'all, there's more that happens. The last thing that I really want to cover, because there's more separation, there's more loss. The wife that he took, the maidservant of Sarah, that Abraham took, Hagar, there was beef, 2 wives. It's probably why it's just best to have the one, because that's probably enough. There's beef, the wife, the children. Abraham ends up having to set Hagar off on her way, away from his life with Sarah at the time now, and Isaac, the promised child. But God does promise, because this is your seed, he will be a great nation. But that's more loss. He had to make a decision, you guys, between children. It wasn't even really wives. Because, like Sarah was really, really his wife, like they were walking this journey together. Hagar became his wife because they were trying to make, not to say they didn't have good relationship, whatever, but that wasn't his, the one he did life with. That wasn't that one. This wasn't even about wives, it's about children. It's almost like he had to choose one child over the other. Imagine doing that. Imagine having to say, I can only take one of you. What kind of decision is that? What kind of decision? I mean, you would look at God at that point and be like, how could you put me in a situation? And how could you cause me to have to deal with this? And God has to remind him, remember, there are things, that consequences that come about because of our decisions. Now, I will take care of Ishmael because that is also your seed. But you made this mess. You got to fix it. You've got to walk through it. You've got to walk through that separation. He will be blessed. He will be cared for, but it won't be by you. These are consequences. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was Abraham's new level of faith. And that is when he has his promised child. He has Isaac. And this is the one that he waited for 4 years. The promise started at 80, given to him at 80. And he walked all the way through, I believe it was 99, 19 years. If it was 100, 20 years, even worse, But he walked through that. He received that promise. The thing that we say we're waiting on all the time. And then God says, we've been doing this walking, this journeying together for a while. But we're going to move to a new level. Remember, this thing is level to level, glory to glory, right? We don't remain on the same level with God. So God says, I have to test you. I have to test to see where your heart is. Are you walking with me because of the blessings? Or are you walking with me because I am your God? I am your God. I'm your provider of life and of everything. Why are you walking with me? And he walks Abraham through this test. He gives him a commandment. Abraham gets up one day. He's like, oh, go on to this mountain, Moriah, I believe it is. Chapter 22. Genesis 22. Go to Mount Moriah, to a place where I'm going to show you. Take your son, Isaac, the promise, your only son. Y'all, this is a message we got to dig into deeper. I'm not going to go into deep now. Your only son and your promised child. And go on this mountain and sacrifice him. All right. Start the journey. Let's go. You're like, wait a minute. My only son, what you promised me. The thing that you promised me. And you said, wait on this thing. And I did. I might have messed up a little bit along the way. But I did. And you delivered. You are faithful, God. And you delivered this promise to me. And then you said, go on there and kill it? This can't be God. How many people would say, this isn't God? This is not God. This is not God. This is not God. Hey, you guys. Uh-oh. Sorry, let me cancel that. I see. Oh, my gosh. I can't see. Hold on. I just see people joining. Hold on. Oh, it's Matilda and Tinina. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, y'all. So we're talking about Abraham and the story of his journey. So just how many people would just be like, that's not God. That's the voice of the devil. That's the enemy to my soul. That's the accuser of the brethren. That is not God. God is not going to give me a promise and then say, go sacrifice and kill this promise. That is not God. How many people would say that? But Abraham had been walking. You guys, we just went through this. High level. Abraham had been walking with God from season to season to season. Abraham had been walking with God through ups and downs, through failures, through disappointments, through loss, through pain, through heartache. Abraham had been walking with God. And in all of that, the one thing that probably was more, that probably he gained in all of that, and I'm sure he gained a lot, but he was able to discern the voice of God. So when he heard God say, get up, Abraham. There's another place I'm going to show you. Get up. Go onto this mountain. Take your son and go sacrifice him. He knew that was the voice of God. But just like the promise that God gave him with the promise of the heir, of Isaac, of the son that would come through him and the descendants that would follow, it didn't make sense. Remember, in that promise, he didn't have any children. He was past the age of being able to really have children. And even if he could, and it's a fluke, his wife definitely was past that. And so it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense what God was saying. And so, but all he knew, because God kept reminding him, God reminds us and comes back and reminds us of the promise, is that I will bring this thing to pass. And Abraham believed God. That's why he was called the father of faith. That's why he was called, it was accounted to him as righteousness, it even said. So now, all these years later, Abraham is once again on a journey that God's sending him on. And he knows that Isaac is the one that will release the promise of all these descendants that are to come. But God is saying, go and terminate that promise. Go with me. Let's go do it. Come on, right now. Let's go. And Abraham has to remember where he was before. He has to remember that mindset. He has to remember God's voice. He has to remember the character of God. That he does not lie. That he will not lie. That he cannot lie. But at that time, all he knew is that he would not lie. What he said will be, will be. You wait on it, you believe for it, you stand in it, you walk in that thing. I don't care what it looks like, it's what I said. And I didn't say that I needed you to do anything, but walk with me in faith. And when I give the commandment, do that. I didn't say bring it to pass yourself. I didn't say go get a wife and then try to make the promise come to pass. I didn't say step out and do it in the time frame that it's supposed to happen. In that Kairos time, in the ordained time that God has, the promise will come to pass. And so now Abraham is saying, but if I kill this, how is God going to bring his promise? And he remembers, that's not your concern. Your concern is not how. Your concern is not why. Why is God asking this? Why is God doing this? Your concern isn't even when. We like to know, trust me. When? When, God? When? When? You said it. When? But the biggest thing that gets us is how. That's what gets our belief. Is how. How? But the book of Habakkuk tells us that the vision is for an appointed time. And it surely will not tarry. It's not going to come later than the appointed time. Your time, it may tarry, because that's your timetable. But the appointed time is God's timetable. And it surely will not tarry beyond that. So Abraham now has a decision to make. And because he knows the voice of God, because he's been walking with God, he can say, this sounds crazy, but I'm going to walk it out and the Lord will provide. And he walks. He goes with his servant. He goes with his son. They carry everything they need for the sacrifice. He leaves his servant there and he says, hey, me and my son, we're going to go up further. We're going to, do the sacrifice. We'll be back. The guy said that you was going to sacrifice him. All I know, God said that this is the son that will release the promise for my descendants. So God, whatever it is you're saying, you will provide. You will make the way. You will make it happen. And he goes up on the mountain with his son. And he prepares to sacrifice, kill his son. But before he can do it, once again, the voice of God comes to him and says, Abraham, hold on, wait. Pass the test. Please don't kill him. You pass the test. You guys, this is why it's so important to walk with God. We can be dissuaded, whatever. We can be swayed by so much in this world. We can be swayed by other voices. We can be swayed by people with good intentions. We can be swayed by family. We can be swayed by friends. We can be swayed by the news. We can be swayed by what society says. We can be swayed by culture. We can be swayed by emotions. We can be swayed and get off task and get out of line. But that's why God says, quiet yourself. You're walking on a journey with me, especially when I say, hey, get up, let's go here. This is not the time for you to bring 12 people with you and y'all are like partying. God has got the promise for us, like we heading out to the promise. You and the 12 people going to be sitting off, on the side of the road away from the promise because you will not be able to hear the voice of God. God calls us to focus when we walk with him, to commune with him, to have time with him, to pray to him, to be quiet with him and listen, to have times of consecration where we pull ourselves away. God calls all of this as we're building this relationship with him, so that when we get to this level that Abraham was at, most of us couldn't even walk on this level. The father of faith, that's why. Couldn't even walk there when he got to this point. Remember, he didn't start there. But when he got to this point, he was regularly communing with God. So he gets on there and he says, I'm going to go through with it. God will provide. And he stops him from killing his son and provides a ram in the bush, which he sacrifices. And Abraham names the place Jireh. That's where we hear that Jehovah, which is a name for God. Jehovah, which comes from, is a derivative or whatever of God, which is Yahweh. Jehovah, it's a derivative. You hear all these names of God. That's one of them you'll hear. And then the Jireh means provide, like to provide. And that's why he's called Jehovah Jireh, the provider, my provider, our provider, the God who will provide. And Abraham names that spot Jireh because he names that spot, the Lord will provide. He names the spot, the Lord will provide. That's kind of all that I wanted to go over today, is the story of Abraham, the journey, and how a lot of us who are walking through that, it's not very different. We can take really good cues from this. And if you have time, you're not going to do this all in one day. Take time so you can soak it in, but go through the story of Abraham from chapters 12 through 22. It's 10 chapters. It is. Like I said, I didn't read it in one day. And I've read it before, but sometimes God calls us to read things slowly, so he can give us understanding in that. And it gives us understanding of the journey that we walk, and sometimes the things that don't make sense, and sometimes the things that are hard, and the decisions, or sometimes I feel it, and I know you're calling me to this thing, but this calls me to leave so much more. This is why the Bible is here. It's our instruction guide. It's the thing that we turn to when we're like, I'm walking through this and I really don't know what to do. It's our truth. It's our guide. And so we're going to come back and we'll do some more. But I just wanted to highlight Abraham today in our new beginning, because that's how he started, with a new beginning. And in that new beginning was a promise. Today's our new beginning. It's our new year. Again, for those that missed, 5783 is the year on the Hebrew calendar. And today, September 25th, so it's our new year. There's a new promise. There's a covenant. There's a journey that's taking place. And so while we're here, let's go back and look at Abraham's ups and downs. He's called the father of faith, not just because he was so faithful, not because he was perfect or obedient all the time, not because he was skillful or intellectual, not even because of his birthright. He's called the father of faith because he believed God when everything looked contrary to that. Not even that he walked in the right way obediently all the time. He believed. And it said it was accounted for him as righteousness. So our journeys are not very different, you guys. But I just want to mention this. This is something that God is asking us through this journey of our new year. God is asking us to walk through with faith. How do we do that? How do we walk through with faith? How do we display faith? How do we walk in faith? How do we live out a life of faith? And it's by putting everything, like we saw in this last little journey, I guess, part of the journey that we went over with Abraham was when he called him to put his son on the altar. His son was the promise. His son was everything. It was everything to him. But that's what God calls us to do in order to walk in faith. There are going to be times and levels and seasons, of course, of testing. But what God is going to say, why are you following me? Why are you walking with me? Is it because of what I've provided for you? Or is it because I am your everything? And if I am your everything, then put your everything that's in your hands. Put that on the altar. Sacrifice it on the altar. And if you can do that, then we'll continue this journey together and grow from level to level to level, from covenant to covenant, blessing to blessing, promise to promise, the fulfillment of promises. But it begins with us not just saying it, not just saying we have that life, we're living that life, that faith life, we're walking in it, but allowing God to decide when we put our everything on the altar, what lives, what dies, and what's allowed to journey with us to the next stage of life. All right, guys, so that is it. Happy Sunday once again. I hope everybody is well. Again, I was taking my break. I was taking my hiatus. I was listening to God for my transitions. And so I had a break from you guys, but I'll be back with more. And this next month in October, we just want to talk about more things, journeying with God, journeying through things like mental health. You guys, health month is coming up. What does God have to say about that? How does Jesus, the stories of Jesus and the power, I don't even say the stories, the power that is working with us through that relationship, through that promise and that covenant. How do we combat these things? So there's more to talk about, but today is our new beginning. The scripture recap was from Genesis 12 through 22. And that is journeying through the promises of Abraham. So I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of story time. And also just the encouragement that God put on my heart to share with you about this time. So Happy New Year once again. And you guys have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll talk soon.